Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animated features not made by Disney. I'm your host, Octaviano, and today I'm going to be talking about a movie that most of you have probably not heard of. It is a foreign feature from Mexico. From my understanding, it is available through Disney Plus in Latin America, but in the US, I've only seen it on HBO, HBO Max. And before anyone questions this, it is a studio that is not Disney, so it counts for this show. Even though it's on Disney Plus in its countries, in other countries, it's just, sometimes Disney Plus gets, distribution rights for certain things that they don't make. I mean, technically speaking, because of the Fox buyout, the Dragon Ball movies that are coming out now would be released through Disney. Because, Fox. Yeah, it's fair to say that this is not a Disney movie. And just so I don't go any further without saying what it is. The movie is Un Disfraz para Nicolas. Or, in English, A Costume for Nicholas. Very cute movie. It is something that feels like a movie that we would have gotten here ages ago. Like, not that I'm saying that it's generic or anything, but it feels like something that you would have watched, like, if you were a kid, during, like, the late 90s, early 2000s, when reruns on, the big channels were still pretty much the norm, because Disney Channel granted, I haven't seen Disney Channel in who knows how long, but they used to show a lot of, like reruns of stuff that Disney didn't even own, stuff that you would normally not expect to see, on Disney Channel. And that used to be much more of a norm. Point being is that it is something that feels very, 80s, 90s, like, in terms of, it's pretty much, like, my first impression of it is, like, it's kind of like, I'm not sure how many of you have ever heard of this movie, but, like, Little Nemo, and I know there was the comics and the video game for that, but, yeah, like, it's kind of like that. Kind of reminded me of, like, the Never-Ending Story as well. I do get some vibes of some, like, more recent movies. Like, I do get vibes of, like, something like the Lego Movie in terms of, like, the random assortment of characters that come along for the adventure. But for the most part, it really does feel like something that would have been made years ago, even though it's a fairly recent feature. And like I said, it is a foreign one. It's from Mexico and, the country of my origin. Well, background more, I don't know, man. The point is that my family's from there. But, yeah, it's just a very interesting movie. It's very cute. It's fun. It's basically about a kid with Down syndrome. They don't really make that much of a big deal out of it, like, as in, like, they don't harp on it too much or anything, which I got nothing against that. It is more focused on telling an adventure fantasy story, so we don't need to bog it down with, like, oh, this is why it's okay to have this or that. Like, look, the story's gonna, make this kid heroic. We don't need to, shove in, like, the actual thing. And again, not that that's necessarily bad. Because my initial thought when I heard that this was about a kid with Down syndrome was like, okay, so they're probably going to make that a major focus of the story. Like, they're probably going to be like, okay, here's some kids that bully him for that. And by the end, it, proves that, he's good, because, he is a smart kid and, a lovable kid. And, having Down syndrome is not an impediment to how good he is. I thought that's what it was going to be. But again, it's not really brought up much. It's something that you mostly know because, the behind the scenes stuff, and the movie even showcases this in the credits, where it's like, okay, here's a kid, and you're like, oh, okay, so, it is a kid with Down syndrome playing the main character, which is neat. It's honestly nice to see that kind of representation. But again, it doesn't focus on it, and, it works for the story because it is more of a fantasy story, and it works for what it is. But yeah, like, so you have this kid with Down syndrome who basically at the start of it, his mom tells him this whole story about, like, this fantasy world where, like, all these great heroes, like a monkey, an abominable snowman, a skeleton, a cowboy, a pirate, a general, like, pretty much, like, all these people came together to fight in this war against nightmares. And there's, like, a whole, like, an evil wizard who feeds on nightmares with their monsters. And, that teaches this kid to be like, okay, I'm going to be brave. I'm not ever going to have nightmares, even though characters, pretty much, as of course the story goes along, mention, like, okay, it's not bad to have nightmares. Nightmares can be good things for various reasons. It pretty much, like, from there, it's like, okay, let's jump to some time later where it turns out that the mom passed away. So now Nicolas, the main character, is pretty much forced to live with the grandparents. with a cousin of his who also has trouble with his parent. In this case, the cousin's name is David. His father is a pilot, so there's often times where he just goes long stretches of time without seeing the father. So, that whole, it's just the whole trouble. And for the most part, that's, like the heart of the movie, just seeing the two cousins bonding. You get this whole story where, like, okay, David doesn't like Nicolas, and of course I do like that they don't try to make it like, oh yeah, he doesn't approve of him because of his condition. It's more like, look, I don't really like the idea of having to share my room with someone else. I'm already struggling with the fact that my father is never really around. There's a lot of stuff to it that to me just feels like, okay, yeah, this is, really good, storytelling. It's really good character. It's just neat. And of course, with it being a fantasy and with the whole setup with the fantasy story, it ends up going like, okay, so the cousin is having nightmares, which results in Nicolas finding out that, oh, the monster is coming here to feed on his nightmares, and finds the fantasy world through his little toy chest, which basically results in him finding this girl who's trying to find her cousin from the wizard and pretty much rescue her. So, you get that whole thing and like, okay, so, it's a rescue mission. Along the way, they're going to meet the various figures that the mom talked about, because you see right away the monkey from the story is the girl's assistant. So yeah, along the way they meet the pirate, the abominable snowman, the cowboy, all that stuff. And of course it turns out that like, okay, so the reason why the cousin of the girl is missing is because it goes back to the story from the start of the movie where it was a deal to end the war. But it's, of course the characters are like, look, even though, yes, it brought us peace, it's not worth sacrificing, someone we care about for this. So, again, it is a very cute story. I don't want to go too much beyond that just because this is not one that's been seen by a lot of people. And if I'm completely honest, this is the kind of movie that I would love to talk about. It pretty much is why, a big part of why I made this show. Like, even though I do like talking about some popular stuff like Shrek or, Spider-Verse, pretty much stuff that people have most likely seen, I do want this to, kind of get more people watching stuff that, they might not have ever heard of, for one reason or another, this one being a foreign film. Foreign films, even at the most known, struggle to get an audience because, a lot of people tend to go for like, okay, look, we want to go for the English language movie or whatever. And, there's already a stigma against animation. So I get that this is not going to be something that gets found easily. So I am, happy to at least try to get that, out there. Because it is really, it's a really charming little movie. And yeah, it's just a really cute, well-made fantasy story that reminded me of a lot of, stuff that I grew up watching. Like I said, The Never Ending Story. It kind of reminded me of Little Nemo. It has those little aspects. Realistically, if there's any problem I have with the movie is that the animation is a bit wonky at times. It's 2D animated movie, and for the most part, it works for what it is. The designs are really cute. It kind of reminds me of like French features, stuff like the French art style, being someone who's played a lot of games. It did remind me of like the Professor Layton games, which is heavily influenced by French animation styles. So, seeing that for this was very cute, and I do like the animation, how it goes when it goes on the more fantasy side of stuff. It's just that on occasions you'll notice the way characters moves is a bit janky. It's mostly, I notice it's mostly in pretty much like the real world, when it's like, the normal people 1 hour, you'll notice like some of the movement is a bit stiff, like the way they lean back and forth. But again, it's still a very neat looking movie. It's nothing that ruins the movie. It's just something that I was like, okay, I am seeing the issue there. And to be fair, it's one of those things where it's like, look, I know that when it comes to animation, it's hard. Even something that's cheap is definitely going to be hard to make. And I know that there are limitations when it's not coming from a big studio. And maybe this is a big studio in Mexico. I'm not sure. I'm not too familiar. I should really do more homework on these, but, there's only so much you can do. And it is, something where it's like, okay, look, I know it's not Disney. I know it's not even DreamWorks or, someone with money to burn. So I get where the shortcomings are going to, appear. And despite that, it's still a very cool looking movie. Well, not cool, but I would say cute. This is not to diss it. It's just that, I wouldn't say cool about something that looks adorable. But yeah, it's a really nice, adorable looking movie. I do like how a lot of it is just, like, it doesn't, hold back from having characters get mad at the Nicolas character, but it also doesn't try to devolve itself into just being like, okay, let's try to be, honest about this. Let's, make characters, really, I don't know if this is the right term, but, like really bigoted towards, him because he's got Down syndrome. Like, no one, treats him like shit because of that. And I appreciate that. Again, I don't want to really spoil this because it's something that a lot of people haven't seen, but just to go into one little spoiler that comes along the way. So if you don't want to hear this, maybe stop this and, come back to it once you've watched the movie if you're interested, or if you're fine with spoilers. Basically what is that, like, the supposed, like, the big bad of the movie is supposed to be the wizard character, who in the end is revealed, like, no, it's just the person who is just acknowledging, like, hey, look, nightmares are fine, and, we really don't want a whole war. It's just that, we want you to understand what's going on and, the truth about these things. I thought that was kind of an interesting twist on it, because by the time we were getting there, it's like, okay, this is getting, close to the end, because it's a fairly short movie. It's only like 80 minutes, and by the time that they're getting to the wizard, it's already well over an hour, and I'm like, I don't know how much time you got to develop this character, if it is, like a just a straight up stereotypical, evil villain. And it turns out that, it's just a well-meaning character. It's just, misunderstandings, which is also kind of neat. It is something that we've started seeing more in Western productions, especially like with Pixar, where it's like, we don't really necessarily have villains, which, not that I got anything against villains. I love villains in movies, but at the same time, not every story needs them. And in this story, it's like, okay, it's just characters with misunderstandings. Like, even, so to speak, the closest thing to an actual villain throughout most of the movie is the uncle of the little girl that Nicolas meets, who basically is trying to keep things the way they are, just because he's like, look, I really don't want to go back to war. It's nice being in peace. So seeing that in this is nice, that they don't just devolve into making everyone like just stereotypical villains. It's actual storytelling. It's well thought out. It is something where it's like, okay, is this needed for the story? Is this not? And of course with the wizard, it's kind of neat that they eventually reveal, like, oh yeah, it's actually a woman. And you can tell right away because you could hear the voice, like, okay, this is not a man's voice, but yet the characters are, kind of, referring to her as a man, until she pulls back and is like, oh, I'm actually a woman. And it's like, I mean, I kind of gathered that, but, whatever, it's a story, and I guess it's supposed to be a whole thing on how a lot of these stories often emphasize, male roles for things like this. So, I get it. And, it is neat for what it is. It is a pretty cute twist. But yeah, for the most part, it is just a really cute fantasy. It is the kind of thing that I wish we would see more often with animated features that we get here in the US. Because it's like, I get it, some of these movies are made for kids, but at the same time, kids aren't stupid. You can try to, talk to them like adults without dumbing yourself down. Yeah, you can simplify what you're saying without actually going stupid. And, again, this isn't this anyone in particular, because realistically, this is a problem throughout the industry. But at the same time, I do acknowledge that there is positives, much like with this movie, there is positives that we can find even in Western features. Well, this is technically a Western feature. This is Mexico. But my general point is that, there is positives that you can find in American-made features for animation. It's just that this could definitely be something that could be used for, certain studios to acknowledge, like, hey, look, we can be more confident and not just trying to pander to, what a statistic says. Like, we could actually make this into a loving story where characters and story matter more than just, okay, do we have a fart joke or a reference or something that, kids might know, so that, because that's what they say makes the money. I don't know. It is a very neat feature to watch in that regard. like I said, there's not really much I really had an issue with other than just some of the animation could be janky, but at the same time, I can't complain too much because I understand why that happens, and it's not like it ruins the look of the movie, because there's still a lot of stuff that, you know, looks charming for what it is. It's not one of the best looking movies I've ever seen, but it is still a cute little one, and it is one that would be fun to watch for how it's presented. And look, I know that some people don't want to read subtitles and stuff like that. I don't know if there's an English language version of this, and realistically, I don't want it, because I know when it comes to English language versions of foreign features, sometimes you get the studios that actually care. Like, you know, as much as you want to hate on them, Disney did put a lot of good effort on doing like the Studio Ghibli features when they translated them, but there's a lot of these that don't. I mean, coming off of the Pinocchio movie that came out, and look, not that the Pinocchio movie that I talked about before would have been better in its Russian language, because come on, it's a stupid story regardless. But I know that there's a lot of movies, even the ones that may not be great, that get ruined once you change the language, because either studios try to force in random celebrities that don't fit in the roles, or just try to force in jokes that, you know, pretty much like what I mentioned, like the pop culture, like the stuff that it's like, this wasn't in there and it wasn't needed. So yeah, you know, watch it in its original language. Subtitles, do help. And look, I know that some people might not be able to read those so easily, but there are ways around this. So watch it in its original language. If there is a good English dub, then by all means, I'd like to hear it from some of you guys. It would not affect me if there is a good English dub, because it's like, look, at the very least, if you have to watch it in that way, at least have it be a version of it that, does its job well. So if there is one, by all means, look at, watch that and let me know about it so that I can, give my thoughts on it someday maybe, or just at least acknowledge like, oh, okay, so they did make something special, so that's kind of cool. As it is, I just know Spanish language, give it a shot. It's definitely a fun one on HBO Max. And yeah, I wish more animated movies could be like this and just treat their audience well. Just acknowledge, like, look, we're not gonna go by what a chart says is good for you. We're just gonna do our best at telling a story that is heartfelt and, the stuff that we want to see without worry about it being on some checklist of, okay, this is a thing that kids like. Yeah, it's just a really sweet movie, and honestly, I'm definitely going to watch it again. I do recommend watching it. Like I said before, the main character, great. I like how, again, it's a main character who has Down syndrome, but they don't try to do this whole, like, okay, let's make it super negative or anything like that. Let's try to make it hurtful for the character, just so we can make a point about how, having Down syndrome is not bad. Instead, they just go like, look, he's going to be a hero, so that automatically, tells you right there that, just because you have Down syndrome doesn't mean you can't be a hero, so it's already a good thing. And yeah, even if that other version might have been a good movie too, I'm glad for the version we got, and I would not change that up. So yeah, it's a fun movie. A Custom for Nicolas, or Un Disfraz para Nicolas, if you want to go with the actual language. And I know I probably sound weird. I know my Spanish can have its accent, because look, I'm American born. I speak mostly English, but I do understand Spanish, because of course my background is just, you'll hear the accent every now and then, and whatever, that's fine, It is what it is. I don't care. Mock me for it. So, yeah, I think that's really about it. I don't know if I had anything else. I mean, I do think that some of the action, because there's not really much action scenes in this, but some of the stuff is kind of fun. Like what looks almost like an imaginary fight with well, not really imaginary fight, but pretty much like the pirate like imagines his own boat and ocean and stuff like that, and that was kind of neat. The cowboy, instead of having bullets, he has like these, like his gun makes people smile and has like the whole paint and stuff like that. Like, so, which is why his name is like Giggles. Like he almost feels like, what if the Joker was a cowboy and not a bad guy? So that's kind of neat. I guess if there's any disappointment is that while the skeleton does factor into this movie, and it is mentioned in the story early on, the skeleton doesn't really do much once it actually comes into play. So that actually is kind of disappointing. Like I thought by the time the skeleton was introduced, which was fairly late into the movie, that you'd still see the skeleton, actually hanging around the heroes, at least for those final few minutes. But no, just there for one bit and then he's gone. And I don't know, that's I guess the only other thing that's kind of lame about it outside of the animation. But again, fun movie, and I really don't want to spoil too much on it, so definitely go watch it. I've given you a little bit, so I hope that gives you an idea of whether or not you want to see it, or at the very least gives you some hype on it. I don't know. For the most part, like I said, fun movie. Go watch it. It's on HBO Max. If you're in foreign countries, it's apparently on Disney Plus. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching if you're on YouTube. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Hopefully it's something special. Thank you for coming on and listening to me today. If you enjoyed it, you can always subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can follow my podcast. It's on Podbean, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And if you want to support me even more, there's always the option of Patreon. Patreon is a great way to support artists. And with that, you can always put in $1 or even more. It's all up to you, all just to help produce the show and other things I may do. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the coming future.